This is a clip from a 1 hour and 15-minute interview with Peter Keegan and Tom Shepard. The full interview can be found in the social media course for artists. To learn more and sign up, see the link below.
My name is Peter Keegan. I'm a full-time professional artist. I studied fine art at Cardiff School of Art. That's where I'm from originally. And I've been working as a full-time artist for about 12 years now. And since graduating, a bit before that, I was working in a part-time capacity. I regularly write for a lot of the art magazines. I take part in different art festivals and exhibitions and show at a few Mal Gallery Royal Society exhibitions in London as well. Primarily as a portrait artist that specialises in oil painting. The main bulk of my income of what I do is commission portrait work. So I produce a number of portraits, both private and public. And then the other part of my business is I teach as well. I teach and tutor people in terms of painting in a similar approach to me, but other styles as well. And also coaching and guiding people in terms of taking their art career just that little bit more seriously in terms of becoming a bit more of a working artist. So I have a love of not just sort of practicing the art, but also preaching the kind of the way that we as artists can do it to make it seriously work for us as a viable and credible business. There's many different kind of franchises to what I do. It's not just necessarily one thing about being an artist, although of course that is the bedrock of what I do. I'm aware that I need to have sort of fingers in different pies or sort of table legs under the table to keep it supported up in different areas of what I do. Running a business is quite a creative, fun enterprise. Don't get me wrong, it is hard and it is difficult, and I have support on those areas where I'm not particularly strong at, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And social media is all part of that in terms of the marketing, but that diversity of what I do as an artist, I think is quite exciting and propels me forward and is the fortunate thing that keeps me able to be a working artist.
So my name is Tom Shepard, and I've been working as an artist professionally for probably coming up to 15 years in one way or another. And like Peter, I kind of kicked off sort of part-time. I was running a gardening business alongside my art practice. So that was interesting. And then I made that leap to being a full-time artist, probably about sort of 12, 13 years ago. I've been through oils, I've been through acrylics, and the last sort of 6 or 7 years, I'm almost entirely a watercolor painter. I've kind of fallen in love with the medium. I would say I've found my artistic voice, if you want to call it that, with watercolor. And as well as selling paintings, producing paintings, like Peter, teaching does take up a significant part of my business. Initially, it was a lot of in-person teaching. And then in the last 3 or 4 years, it's moved online a lot more. And I also have an online watercolor school, which launched about 9 months ago. And I want to really focus on that and build that. So various different income streams. Again, like Peter, I've just started writing for the Artist magazine, doing some articles. And I'm also working with Search Press to produce my first book, which is really exciting. So the point being that there's lots of different kind of income streams, but I do actually enjoy kind of running a business and being creative with those decisions, pursuing new opportunities, making your own opportunities. And it's hard sometimes. I'm generally a one-man band. I do have someone that does a little bit of admin for me. So there's a lot to manage, particularly when we start talking about social media as well. I think one of the most important things with social media, and I can probably talk as much about where I've done things badly with social media as much as I can do well, but one of the really important things is being very clear and having a lot of clarity about why you're using social media and what you're using it for. And for me, it can be tricky, but also at the same time, it's pretty clear. So because of my online watercolor school, which is why I'm focusing a lot of attention, that's one very clear end goal, is to take people, and I use Instagram almost predominantly, if not completely, to take people and kind of push them over towards the online watercolor school, but that's kind of teaching. But at the same time, I do produce a lot of paintings, and I love getting my work in front of people that are going to appreciate it. And of course, as a professional, I am looking to sell my work as well. So that's kind of another thing. And I want to push people over towards selling my work. So some of that selling is directly for Instagram, but a lot of the time it's taking people from Instagram and kind of directing them elsewhere, hopefully leading to some painting sales. So for me, over time, the way that I use social media has become very clear, and it's fallen into those two camps of kind of teaching and painting sales. Where it gets a little bit trickier is then how do you produce content that supports both of those but doesn't clash with each other, and also doesn't become confusing for me to try and manage, but also confusing for people visiting my Instagram page. Because I think if people go to any page on social media, but for me, Instagram, and it's not immediately clear what it is you do and how you do it, then I think it becomes a little bit muddy for people, and I think you will lose their interest, because so much these days is people have short attention spans, and we need to kind of tell people very quickly what it is that we do and whether it's going to be of interest to them or not. Like, we'll get onto this more, but also accepting it's not going to be of interest to everyone. So that's kind of how I think about social media. I very much think of it as a tool to be used that kind of keeps me in the right kind of working mindset with it.
I use it primarily as partly a sort of a mini portfolio. It's sort of the portfolio I have in my pocket on people's devices around the world, where they can see at a very quick glance what I do. So if someone is searching for me online and they find me that way, I can very quickly show somebody, or they can discover the type of things that I do. And I see it as a sort of almost, that's the first gateway to the website. Sometimes people, I think, misunderstand that your website is the first point of call, and inevitably people find you through social media and then to the website. So I kind of keep that I keep that in mind in terms of what I'm posting, in terms of the content. Sometimes it is portfolio-based work of here paintings I've finished or here works in progress, but I'm also aware, of course, that it is a marketing tool. I'm using social media in order to let my customers know the different services that I am offering, some of which I will profit from, but also in terms of sharing what I do in a slightly wider sector. So it's, exhibitions I'm involved with, or organizations that I'm kind of going to be working with, where I may not directly profit from, but it's something that I think my audience would benefit from, and in the wider sense, the organizations that I'm working with, we will all benefit from together. So it's a starting point for lots of customers who wish to find me. I'm aware that not everybody, as Tom said, is going to kind of funnel through to the website and certainly purchase. And I'm aware that certainly there are lots of people that will be engaged with it that won't, engage with the content, but that is fine. I'm aware that in order to live on social media, you have to have quite a thick skin, because you will not be to everybody's taste and cup of tea, but that is fine. It's a very broad offering and a starting point for people to start coming through to the different sales items that I have on offer as an artist.
I think what's really great about social media, as opposed to, say, a website, is that particularly through stories, but also through posts and some of the other things on Instagram, for example, but all social media platforms, you can give a little bit more of a behind the scenes kind of feel to what you're doing as well, if you want to. And I think that makes the relationships that you build with your followers, it becomes very different from a website. It's maybe a little bit more personable and a little bit more intimate as well. And so it's a different type of relationship than, say, just for a website, which is fantastic, but at times can be a little more faceless and less personable in that way.
One of the things I like about social media is that it is authentically from my voice. It's not going through a third, fourth party. Sometimes websites sort of, they look very smart, sometimes in corporate or very slick, but sometimes it's not necessarily feeling that you're speaking directly to the artist. Of course, when I'm being contacted through social media, or of course, when I'm speaking, it is from me direct. And I think people like that. They respond very well, that they can have access to you directly and vice versa. So I do use it from that perspective as well, that it is me as a point of contact.
I know, as, like, if you want to call it, a punter on social media, following other artists who I admire, like, I can't get enough of seeing what's going on behind the scenes and what they're doing. I love reading posts where they give maybe some more insight into their kind of creative practice and their mindset more than anything. And it's a lot of social media, although on the one hand it's very logical and it's very tangible, there's a lot of numbers involved, there's a slightly less tangible side to it, which is when you start presenting yourself to the world, but in an authentic way with your own voice, those relationships and those connections you make, it's very hard to pin down exactly how those lead to things in the bigger picture, like what exactly sales opportunities, networking comes from this voice that you have through social media.
And I would add to that as well, that the social media accounts that I get a lot from in terms of a follower are the ones where the artist comes across the most authentic. They're not, there isn't sort of a brand or a glaze. They are generally being themselves. And then when I instill that mentality in my own posts and marketing that I do, those posts that are the most authentic, where I'm just being myself, are inevitably the ones that get the most traction, get the most interaction, and do very well, as opposed to me trying to do something I think people want or I think's going to work. Actually, the sincerity of you being you is your biggest asset, and that's what people will engage with most. You have to start with nothing, and you're going to start with nothing, and you're not going to know everything, okay? And I think it's completely unreasonable and unfair to expect anyone starting out, or sort of, who have started, relatively recently, that they're going to have to know how it all works. Quite often, as artists, as creative people, we learn best by doing. We have to do it, and then you learn what works and what doesn't work. So for me, my journey of how I've used it and how I'm continuing to use it is an on-the-go process. So you start off with putting posts out and not being overwhelmed with, I have to do this and that and that and that. It's better to start with one thing and get comfortable and get familiar. So just if it's just posting an image onto a grid in terms of Instagram or Facebook, just posting up one picture with some text, and just do that and get familiar and find a rhythm of text and image that you think works for you and is sustainable, something that you are able to do. Once you feel happy with that, then I would start going, well, what would happen if I start adding 2 or 3 pictures and adding a link a little bit more, before I've even thought about hashtags, just working up sort of little bit by little bit by little bit. So I didn't put the pressure on me when I started. Otherwise, by putting all that pressure and the burden of having to understand everything, inevitably I wouldn't do it. And I speak to so many artists that because of that pressure to get to grips with this giant monster that is social media, that's constantly changing, that's constantly evolving, inevitably they don't use it because of that pressure. Now, of course, by neglecting that, you're neglecting a potential area of growth for you as an artist. So make your life easier, start with one thing and grow from that. It is fine. You're not going to get told off or looked down upon just by only doing one thing. You will almost be forgotten about by the fact that you're not being on the social media platform at the start. By being on these platforms, it gives you a sense of credibility that you are someone, that you exist out there in the art world. Lots of organizations out there, galleries and places that are looking to work with artists, one of the first things they'll do is see if you have a social media presence. Now, if you're not on social media, you may have a very justifiable reason for that. But of course, that message in itself is telling that organization, well, why aren't they on social media? What is about them they not feel credible or able to put them on there? It's better that you're on there and doing one thing well that you're comfortable with than actually not being on there at all and being sort of overwhelmed by it. So start with one thing and grow slowly. So I was just keeping an eye on other social media accounts, following those artists that I think they're doing it quite well. I'd like to emulate that. And I'm starting then to steal sort of elements of, well, they're posting in this sort of rhythm, this number of pictures, they're using this sort of hashtags, and sort of slowly building into it. So of course I'm starting to feel more comfortable and training and learning on the go.
We hope you enjoyed this clip from our interview and it gave you some new insights into using social media to reach your goals as an artist. To watch the full interview and get all the top tips, as well as 4 other interviews with artists and sessions with our team of art consultants covering everything you need to know about social media, click the link below to join the social media course for artists. The social media course will include best practices from artists working across a range of media. Faye Bridgwater is going to share how she uses social media to sell her paintings, drawings, and prints. Agathe Bouton, who creates abstract work in print, collage, textile, and installation, will share tips on how she photographs her work, how she uses social media to keep in touch with collectors, and to be discovered by galleries or interior designers. Peter Keegan and Tom Shepard, who are both painters and tutors, will tell you how they use social media to support different income streams, including artwork sales and workshops. Jasmine Pradissitto will explain how she uses social media to showcase her sculptures, ceramics, and jewelry pieces, and how platforms like Instagram and LinkedIn have helped her grow her network. All these tips from artists and more will be included in the social media course. For information about the course and how to join, you can click below or see our website, theartladder.com.